Hi, good evening, everybody. Abdul Said, your host tonight, straight out of Cape Town. I welcome you to our show tonight, and we had an awesome weekend with Gymkhana at Killarney. Um, 40 competitors, 40 enters. What an awesome weekend. And just check us out on Facebook and YouTube. And thanks to all the viewers, it was live streamed. And we might need your guys' help on the next one because it costs huge amounts of money to run these live streams, and we might need some help from the community over there, so that we can make sure that the Gymkhana grows in future. And tonight we have an awesome guest on the show. He needs no introduction. His name is John Craig. I'll introduce him a little bit later on. But just before we go to John Craig there, the next Gymkhana is on the 13th of March, which is I think in about 3 weeks' time, at Killarney at Turn 5, from 3 o'clock, from 2 o'clock till 7 o'clock. So you do catch us. Make sure you put it in your diary, and put it on your note on your phone there to keep updated with we're already on 39 competitors, 39 interns for that event. Okay, so I just want to say hello to Byron, my co-host. Hi, Byron.
Hi, Abdul. You well?
I'm really well. You had an awesome weekend because I met you. We were at the racetrack together on Saturday.
All I can say is everybody, big smiles, no long faces. That's what I'm saying all the time. I'm like a broken record. I'm buzzing after this last weekend's event, and I'm buzzing that one is going to be coming up. But I reiterate what you say as well. That we need the community now, and we always have, but now more than ever we need the community, and to bring Gymkhana back up to where it belongs.
Absolutely. And I think, with the way that everything's going now, with the social media platform, with the media platform, with Kyle helping us getting that going as well. And we thank him and his team for putting in awesome effort and lots of hours of work there to make all these things happen. And so we just need to get our show on the road and get the community to get us going, help us get going here with our next event. Obviously it costs a couple of rand to run these events and to make them a success. So without further ado, we have a very, very esteemed guest on the show tonight. This man can talk for very long time on his long history in motorsport. John Craig started his motorsport career in 1978 on a motorcycle. In fact, on a 50cc motorcycle that he used to go to school with. And in 79, if I remember correctly, he was a runner up to the 100cc championship, if I'm not mistaken, on a 50cc motorcycle. So I want to say, well, actually, we just decided very late now that John Craig has got a son, we call it also John Craig Jr., and sometime in their careers, they shared a race car, and they won the race that day. And well, they talk more about that, but so we're going to get John Craig Jr. to come on a little bit later on as well, just to say hi to us and kind of say how he and his dad won that race. So hi, John, welcome to the show tonight.
Hey, how's it, John?
Hi, Abdul, Byron. Hi. Great to see you again, and great to be here.
Yeah, I mean, you've got such an illustrious career, spanning from 1978. That's kind of like, I was probably like about 10 or 11 or 12 years old that time. I can't even remember how old I was. Yeah, so we got like some lekker stories to talk about. So and Byron, I see Nick says hi there, Nick Berger.
Yeah, our good friend we had on last week, Mr. Speed and Sound Magazines himself, Nick Berger, saying, "Aware mense." Well, good evening, Nick. It's great to see you again, and hopefully a lot of folks will be commenting tonight. With all their comments, we're going back down some good memory lane over here as well, which I think is always wonderful.
Yeah, well, it wasn't Nick Berger. Didn't he drive on Saturday as well?
He did. I think what happens is we were on the different. Yes, in the 86, we were on different routes. Him and myself, so I couldn't challenge him.
Well, just tell him that. He can push a few comments through later on to tell us how he enjoyed himself with the 86 on Saturday. Anyhow,
we'd love to hear. Yes.
Yeah, coming back to John. John, like I said earlier on, 1978 was the year of the motorcycle, the 50cc that used to go to school with. And you are born and bred in Cape Town, if I'm correct.
Born in Graafrenet in the Karoo. My dad was what you call a padmaker. He was in road construction, so he moved around a little bit. And I was born in Graafrenet, but he arrived in Cape Town when I was about 3, and been here ever since. He raced back in the pre-war. I've got some nice certificates where he won the Camps Bay hill climb. They used to race up the hill in Camps Bay, a famous event.
My word.
Amazing. He raced. He won those in an MG and a BSA and a Fiat pre-war, and then just after the war. And then he went to the UK for a while around the time Killarney was formed.
Yeah.
But then I was born back in Cape Town, and then all my earliest memories at Killarney, from about when I was in about grade 1 or sub-A then. My earliest memory, I think, is one of the first 3-hour Springbok series at Killarney, about 66 or 67. Why I remember it so well is that it was the days, I was just gone to school, and Van der Merwe jokes were all the fashion back in those days. And there we were sitting opposite the end pit, and it was Sarel van der Merwe. It was his first race. And I had a little school friend there with me, and we were making Van der Merwe jokes. Could this guy drive,
Yeah.
And if you go and read, and obviously I've got to know Sarel, and you read in his book, that was his first circuit race in a DKW 2-stroke 1000.
Amazing.
In 67, and those Springbok series just captivated you. So, from that moment, all I wanted to do was to race cars, actually. Never really bikes, just cars.
Yeah.
And then it just developed from there.
I mean, I was 2 years old in 1967, so I definitely can't remember that.
Well, only a couple of years older, so not too bad. But I mean, you can, when you read about the Springbok series, Porsches, Ferraris, Lolas, Jackie X, these top guys racing, David Piper, they were just magical events. Killarney just packed. People slept there.
Well, maybe tell us about those days, because really, I mean, I don't know about it. There's no footage about it. Byron wasn't even born, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not too sure. So, I mean, he doesn't even know anything about it. Maybe, so maybe give us a couple of minutes on what it was about. I mean, we really don't know what it was about.
Yeah, it's actually a tragedy there's so little footage. Like we were discussing earlier, the only thing you had back in those days were newsreels. Those things, we used to see them at the movies before you got the shows. And in fact, I have one little snippet, which if you get hold of me, I can send it to you or put it in a Dropbox. It's about a 4 or 5 minute snippet they put together for Killarney's 70th anniversary. It was around about the 71 or 72 3-hour, but absolutely incredible stuff. I mean, not to mention, South Africa is still the only country in the world that ever ran a domestic Formula 1 series. So we had Formula 1 racing at Killarney, plus those Springbok series. But it was an event. It was on the front pages of the newspapers. It was like an event came to Cape Town, and no matter who you were, you went to Killarney for the Springbok series because you wanted to see Mike Halewood and David Piper and these guys. And I mean, people used to camp there from the Thursday. My dad worked, so we're going to get there Saturday morning, and I mean, there was just nothing. It was wall to wall people. Probably 20,000 people, which is huge. And it was an international event. It's a pity there's not a lot of footage, but Dr. Greg Mills has written some fantastic books.
Yeah.
If you just look at some of the stuff in his books, he's managed to summarize the Springbok series. And then it went from Cape Town. It started with a 9-hour at Kyalami. Then it came to Cape Town for the 3-hour. And then they went to Scribanti, didn't exist back then, but they went to East London. And then they used to go to Mozambique, occasionally Angola.
Hello.
I think he's frozen there for a second, Abdul.
Yeah,
but just
I think they're still in Angola. The internet connection is really bad in Angola.
Just going based on what John was saying about Dr. Greg Mills, one of the books that he actually wrote is Agriculture, Furniture and Marmalade, South African Motorsport Heroes. It actually depicts, it goes a lot on the time, and I think we're getting John back. Yeah. Ah, there we go.
Yeah. Hi, John. Yeah, we lost you in Mozambique.
Okay, yeah, and then I mean, as I said, the series went up into Angola, all over Southern Africa, Rhodesia, and it was an international series. So that just captivated everybody. So once you'd seen that, all you wanted to do was race, And the incredible thing was there were Ferraris, Porsches, Lolas, but there were also Minis. My all-time hero is Scam Porter in the Renault Gordini. Somewhere on the wall here, there's a picture of him. And the Gordinis running there. My dad had a Gordini, so they were basically driving virtually the same car. My dad had an Alfa and a Gordini, and they were the same cars racing in international championships. Just incredible stuff.
That's amazing. I mean, that is way back in the 60s, am I correct?
Into the 70s, 73, I'll never forget, it was the highlight of my year. I spent the whole year, waiting for that 3-hour at Killarney, and then my dad woke me up, I think the Tuesday morning of the race in 73, and that fuel crisis struck, and motor racing was banned overnight by the government. Overnight, motorsport banned in South Africa. And luckily the 3-hour went ahead because all the cars were here. Guys like Dennis Chabert and Ronnie Hare worked some miracles, got the race to go ahead. But then there was the end of motorsport for about, 6 months to a year with that fuel crisis. And then it never really came back. The 73 fuel crisis, and it never really made a comeback after that. And then internationally, they went to 2-liter sports cars. So the big banger Lolas, Ferraris and things kind of died out as well. But it ended about 73.
Yeah, what engines did those cars run? I mean, were there any classes they ran in?
Yeah, absolutely. The sports car class, the big bangers, they all had 5.7 liter. The Lolas were either Lola Fords or Lola Chevs, 5.7 liter V8s. The Ferraris were 4.5 liter V12s in the P4 Ferraris. Famous names: Paul Hawkins, Frank Gardner, David Piper. The Ford GD40s were 5 liter V8s. The Porsches were always flat sixes, 3.5 liter or 3 liter flat sixes. And then, the Renault Gordinis were 1300s, the Alphas 1600s, Sarl van der Merwe in a 1000cc 2-stroke DKW, everything.
Yeah. And the fastest cars, the fastest cars in those days of the Springbok series, do you have any idea of what times they were doing around Killarney?
Yeah, I do, and it's amazing. If you just look at Killarney, if you want to go even further back to 1960, when they ran the first Grand Prix there, Jim Clark and Sterling Moss in those Formula One Porsches, they did 1 minute 30s. A Class C GTI Challenge car is faster than them today.
Yeah, there's some clubbing cars faster than that.
Absolutely. The track's a bit quicker for sure. Undoubtedly, the track's a few seconds quicker.
Yeah.
The big Springbok big bangers were around about between 16, 17, 18, which, considering they still ran on treaded tires, they didn't have slicks, was very quick. The track was narrow, was slow, but the most incredible time still is around about 73. Brian Redmond did an 11.6 in a 2-liter Chevron, the same as Scribanti races today, same as Renko. I mean, an 11.6 in 1973. That is a time that will just stand, forever.
For a long time.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing.
And the saloon cars, probably in the 30s. The Capri Piranha V8s, their best was a 25 at Killarney. The Alphas, Gordinis, probably in the mid-30s. So they don't sound quick today, but, they were quick at this time, considering what they had.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, just talking about the Capri Piranhas there, John. Those, of course, the old days. I know Peter Lindenberg drove one a number of years ago, the Gunston Capris, I think it was. The beautiful orange and everything like it. And that actually became a symbol in South African racing, because what happens is you had other heroes as well who went on the Formula One scene. John Love, you had Dave Charlton. So how big was it, of course, as well? We also had Grand Prix running in South Africa those years as well, which were huge.
They were massive. The interesting thing is South Africa created cigarette sponsorship, which was basically going back to Johan Rupert, Anton Rupert, Rembrandt and Gunston. And I mean, it sounds insane, but it would be like today, because after the South African Grand Prix, the local sponsors like Aldo Scribanti and Rupert would wait at Kyalami and buy the Grand Prix cars. So Lotus ran a Lotus 49 or Lotus 72. They would take their trailer and load up. I mean, imagine today going and sitting and loading up Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes, after the race. It just sounds insane, but that's what happened.
Yeah,
that's what happened.
You wouldn't even get close to the car.
You get close to the car, and if you got it, you couldn't run it. It needs computers,
Yeah, absolutely.
So they would purchase the McLarens, the Lotuses, the Brabhams, the Surtees, and they would run them in South African Championship. And then I think it was Rupert got the idea to paint his cars in Gunston colours.
Gunston orange.
And then he did it for the start of one of the seasons, 69 or 70. And then when the Grand Prix teams arrived, Colin Chapman said, "Hey, what's this? They've painted their cars," because in those days all the cars, British cars, were green and Italian cars were red. Yeah. And then at the British Grand Prix that same year, the first time the Lotuses appeared in the gold leaf, that
gold leaf colours.
But it's because they saw it happening here locally.
South Africa.
we
It's
created
actually it's actually quite a sad state of affairs if you think from where we've come and where we've gone to. But we'll talk about it later on in the show. The transformation of motorsport. But it's actually quite sad. I mean, like I said, a lot of these things very few people know because they weren't around in the 60s, me included. And it's a rich heritage of wonderful motorsport.
Amazing. And it was across the board. I mean, there was a team from Johannesburg, the Domingo brothers, Joe, Solly, and Eunice. Back in the bad old days of apartheid and all that, you had teams like them running Formula One teams.
Yes, I remember that because they
ran a Formula One team. Incredible. And they were competitive. And maybe their cars were a year older than the Rupert cars and the Strabanti cars, but they were right there. And then, of course, part of that setup, you had Formula 5000. So then they also, maybe you only had 6 or 7 F1 cars, but then that whole lot of Formula 5000 cars. It was just almost as quick. So, world-class stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
So the Formula 1 cars of those days, what engines did they run compared to the Formula 5000s?
All the Formula 1 cars then were 3-liter Cosworths. They were all Cosworth
DFVs,
which went all the way through 480 horsepower. I mean, still today, if you go overseas, they're running them in. It's the famous Cosworth DFV. The Formula 5000s either ran Chev or Ford or Gurney Westlake, so they had to run a stock. Obviously, the 3-liter Formula 1 cars were the Cosworth modified engines, whereas the 5-liter had to run a stock block with modified heads. So they made about the same power, but they were Gurney, Westlake, Ford, Chev, V8.
Yeah, very interesting.
But that being said, actually, John, I think actually as well, it was actually unique, Eric, because the Ford DFV it came in 1967, and for many years, I think the last time a DFV attempted to qualify for a Grand Prix was in 1984, 85. And there was an engine you could actually buy off the shelf, and you just mated it to a Hewland 5-speed in those days. Now, you don't have that in Formula 1 anymore. Everything, of course, is very specialized. But, that's important, I feel, in motorsport, to have something, a stock. Well, I couldn't call it a stock engine, but, an engine that you could buy just like it is. Even in the old days, you could run maybe an old Lotus or an old Brabham, and you could actually attempt to enter Grand Prix like that.
Absolutely. Privateers entered, I mean, the amazing thing.
Sorry, go over.
The amazing thing was then obviously the South African privateers would enter the Grand Prix. And for many years, Dave Charlton held the lap record at Kyalami at a 1:17.2 in his Lotus 72 that the Grand Prix drivers could never break. And the international press used to say it was wrong. They used to say it was a timing error, it was impossible. But one day, one of the famous overseas journalists wrote and said, you know what, it's not wrong. Our races were shorter. They used to be over, say, 30 laps. So they could run a more sticky tire. Plus B, they raced in the Highveld in the middle of winter. And if you've ever been up and raced, I mean, on a cold winter's morning at Kyalami, it feels like your car's got a turbocharger in it, for the temperature when it's low. So I read an article once, they said, no, that time is genuine. Charlton did it, in a race that was in the middle of winter, nice high air pressure, sticky tires, and it was genuine. But I mean, imagine today having a Grand Prix at Kyalami and our local drivers go faster than the Grand Prix drivers. And that's what happened.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just want to, there's a good comment that came through from Dave Hawkins. He says, those were the best days by far, guys. Now, I just want to ask you something, John. I'm not sure if you know, you mentioned the guy, the name of Paul Hawkins earlier on.
Yes. Yep.
He was a South African guy.
No, Australian.
Okay, so I want to actually ask Dave Hawkins, maybe he's listening in there. Was it in the relation of Dave Hawkins? Like, because Dave Hawkins is like a sort of a local hero name here in Cape Town, as far as the modified saloons are concerned. So I don't know, maybe David, maybe it's his brother or something. I don't know. We'll hear from Dave Hawkins there.
He was known for being a typical Aussie who could swear like crazy. Now, I don't know Dave Hawkins like that. So, I'm not sure, but yeah, Paul Hawkins was known as, unfortunately, he died at Alton Park, I think, in a crash a little while later. But he was a legend, yeah. He was a really tough Aussie, yeah.
Well, maybe you didn't hear Dave Hawkins the night before when he started to rebuild the motor after he blew it in the practice. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Maybe there's some link, yeah.
We always, I've always heard folks speak, and maybe I haven't met personally enough Aussies in my life, that we are very similar, South Africans and Australians, because what happens is we've got that can-do attitude. We're so far away from everybody, but it's like we the old days, there used to be guys working on their cars and stuff, like a real garden gate engineering, just to get a motor going and everything like that, big motors, and it's beautiful actually as well. So it's very interesting. And
it is.
Well, we have.
We were lucky to live in Australia for a year, and absolutely. I mean, they've got cars like the Elfin down there that are actually completely Australian built, and they've got a very strong admiration for what we do here, because back in those days, after the cars came here, they used to go to the Tasman series in New Zealand and Australia, so they know a lot about it. So there's a lot of respect here.
Yeah,
but it's amazing.
Dave Wilkins says no, not his family.
No relation.
Because he cannot swear like that. he says he swears better. I'm just teasing. John, coming back to you. So we didn't even start with your career yet. 1978, you rode this 50cc to school. 1979, you decided to enter the 50cc bike in the motorcycle championship, and you were runner up to the 100cc championship. Am I correct?
Almost. Look, my dream was always racing cars. That's what my dad did, and I almost had no interest. In fact, motorcycles, I regarded them as kind of dangerous. And today, karting, you've got to have millions to get to be successful in karting. Back then, it wasn't the same, but it was still. Karting has always been. You need a fair amount of money to go karting.
Absolutely.
And so I was like 14 and I wanted to go racing. Karting was the obvious way to get in, but my folks just didn't have that level of money to get involved. So when I was in standard 9, I got a 50cc bike to go to school and back on, and got to know some of the bike guys, a guy called Jeff Schneider back then, and Dick Bate, who's still around. A few of those guys, got to know them. School Stuart Cassie, a friend of mine. So by matric, I realized that if I want to race, this is what I've got to do. So I actually took the road bike, rode it down in April 1978, stripped it at the track. Used to ride from Plumstead all the way through to Killarney, strip it, race it. And then by then all the lights had blown and you had to ride back in the dark with your fuel on the back. My dad was always a massive supporter, but he was in road construction, so they worked it on a Saturday. And I think finished second last in my first race, but the bug was there. And the amazing thing was when people at that stage saw how hard you were trying, they all jumped in and helped. So by the second race, somebody had given me an old fuel tank and given me some tires. And I used to race in just jeans and a denim jacket and Veldschoenen. And then next thing, there was a set of some old leathers. And so that was 78. And then it was for 79, I actually took my savings up. I finished school then and I had everything I'd saved. And I actually bought a 100cc A100 kitted Suzuki and a proper race bike. So I finished school and we bought an old Bucky, and then I could go down on that. So then I raced that in. So 79, I was runner up on the race bike to Frans Maritz on the 100, because he just dominated the short circuit at that stage.
Donnie's brother. Okay, I was going to ask any relation to Donnie. Okay.
Donnie's brother. Donnie and Frans are two of the quickest, most talented motorcycles. Donnie's incredible, but Frans was just as quick and hard. But anyway, so he beat me in 79, and then 80 he moved up onto this main circuit on an RD 400, and I managed to win the championship in 80, which was my first province championship, and kind of put me on the road. And then that led to, although I must say 81, I was studying at university then, so I just had no funding whatsoever. But I did manage to get a student loan and put something together. So in 81, I managed to race an air-cooled RD 350. Had a fantastic battle with Jan Eckerl, who had just become world champion then. We had another stage then. We had things called the Elna Superbike International events, when the whole world came out here to race superbikes against us. And we had Jan Eckerl, who had just won the world title. The only reason I could stay close to him, he was riding with a broken ankle. They had to cut his boot in half and strap it around his leg. And Jan was known as a wild guy you didn't mess with. But the whole thousands of people had come to see Jan ride, and he had to ride. And I was on my old 350 and managed to ride into him at the first corner, which didn't please him at all. But I went to him afterwards, and and he was known as a very fiery guy. I could see he wasn't too happy, and he just said to me, when I was your age, I would have done the same. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And then I got an icebreaker friend of mine, Steve Tutoy, who's now in Australia, bought an RD 350 LC to race because he'd come out of national. Those days, the guys used to all go and do national service and come back with danger pay and be able to afford to go racing. But then a good Mike Cameron, who's still around, legendary guy, managed to arrange him a ride on a 750. So Steve lent me the 350 to race, and I did very well on that in '82. And in fact, I've still got the bike. I've still got it today, and I ride it in historic events. I've restored that 350 LC, and I've still got it. And it's and then in '80, and then I landed a Yamaha ride. So then I rode the Cape Town dealer team Yamaha 550 in '83. And just got beaten. That's why I know how hard. I mean, France beat me to the province title in '79 on the short track, and then Donnie beat me in '83 to the main circuit title. I was on the 550 Yamaha, he was on the 550 Kawasaki. So, and then moved on from there.
Amazing. Mike Cameron, I remember from Clubman days, he used to ride in Clubmans as well. I think he rode an Opel or something, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. Actually, he bought that. He had an Opel, but the one red Opel he bought, that was the Group N car that a sponsor had bought for me. And then it got a crash, so we straightened it and then sold it to Mike. So yeah, that was actually an ex Janelle de Villiers car. That's that red Opel. That's the car that Janelle
Ian Little sold it to Janelle de Villiers, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, back in 1989, 1990, I think it was. That was his first race at Killarney.
A little bit later, and Janelle started in a Clubmans. He raced in '89, '90. He raced in Ascona in Clubmans.
Yeah,
correct.
He first
red Ascona.
A red Ascona, but then
we raced together as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but his first year on the national circuit in that Opel, we bought it '94, so it was '92 or '93. He raced that red Opel, which a sponsor, a guy who he'd owned Aylesbury ice cream, and then he'd sold it, and he was opening. He opened something called Dunrobin ice cream. He wanted to publicize that. He bought that red Opel for me, and we raced it. But unfortunately, it got crashed, and then he sold it off, and Mike Cameron bought it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a story behind it, that ex-Corneel cadet at Kyalami when you guys, after you guys won the race, you guys tried to escape from with the bakkie and the tow car. Let's talk a little bit about that story. I mean, that's a good story to know. I mean,
wow, there's a good friend of mine. I mean, then we're talking about a really good old friend of mine called Lino, who used to travel with us. And the sponsor bought the bike. He bought the car, and we needed a tow vehicle, so he bought the bakkie from Smitty de Villiers, who was Janelle's dad, and it was a Ford Courier fitted with a V8 motor.
Yeah.
And we towed up, and I mean, I felt like a works driver because this guy had a lot of money. He sold everything. I used to fly around business class, and Lino, good old friend of mine, he towed the car up. So he would tow the rig up, get there. And we had some tremendous success. I should have won in Cape Town. Roddy Turner took me out on the last lap. Great friend of mine today, still Roddy, but man alive, he was a tough guy to race against. So we should have won Cape Town. Roddy sent me off, and then we got to I think the next race was at Swartkops, and I was leading. And if you remember the old Swartkops, you came down a hill through a corner, and it was an uphill to the start finish line. And I think we won the first race, and we were going through to win the second, to win overall. And as I went from third to fourth, the linkage on the bottom of the gear lever broke and left it in neutral.
Oh, my word.
And Roddy came past. And we found out after that you've got to go to a scrapyard and get a metal one because they'd replaced it with a plastic one. So you had to go get an old metal one and sorted that out. And then the following race, we went to Kyalami and we just smoked them. We just ran away, And that night, I think we went straight to a place called the Rattlesnake Diner. Not a lot of supper, way too much to drink, and we were heading back to our partying, and we were heading back to our hotel. We saw these some lights behind us, and we thought it was somebody, having a dice. So this V8 Courier could really, really go, and I think we were doing well over 200 km an hour on the freeway with a car. We did unbeknown to us. This were the cops behind us in a Golf GTI.
Oh.
They caught us, and wow, we were terrified. I mean, we really thought, luckily, Lino was a good guy. He did some smooth talking, And it turned out that when they realized we weren't a bunch of criminals, we're just a couple of crazy guys trying to, we were actually had to go back to the airport. I had to go back and get my stuff to go to the airport. It was 2 in the morning, whatever. All they were intrigued was like, they said, "Jenne, wat is in hierdie bakkie? Ons was flat out and ons kan nie jou vang nie, And so at 2 o'clock in the morning, we had the cops looking under the bonnet of this bakkie, looking at the V8. So, yeah.
Oh my word! What a story, eh? And I mean, what a lekker story. Those are really what is,
could have gone wrong, but it ended well.
Yeah, well, yeah. And yeah, so about anything you want to ask me before I go to the next the step of John's career?
I just want to just actually take a look at the comment over here from Dimitri Giovanni Carsa. He, of course, was one of our photographers on Saturday, which took some great pics. And he said, "Evening, men." So I just want to say good evening to him. And yeah, not too many comments tonight, but hopefully we get up. But just one thing, actually, John, just going back to bikes, you have the unique honor of having partaken in every Killarney 8-hour, even when it was back when it started out as a 2-hour event, I believe.
Yeah, that is a record I'm very proud of. This year was number 38. Unbroken. The only guy that's close to me is my teammate, Jimmy Panton. He's done 37. So, when we stand there this year, we had 75 starts between us. And yeah, in 1983, I started as a 2-hour, so I was still racing bikes. And sadly, I've lost a couple of my teammates along the way. I rode with a chap called Marcus Veldhagen, who was a top Yamaha rider nationally. He unfortunately lost his life at Kyalami a few years later. And then in 84 was a fantastic year. They had a manufacturer's challenge. All the manufacturers brought bikes down to the track in crates. We opened them, ran them in, put them back in the crates, and in the morning of the race took them out. And I rode the factory Suzuki and finished second in 84. And that's actually that's my best result. I've never got a win. So in 38 years, the best I've got is that second. And then I rode many years with a fantastic Gerald Dreyer, Greg Dreyer's brother, who was my teammate for a year. And we had some incredible times, and he sadly died in a road accident, a few years later. But we had some great years, and then over the years, various teammates, and it went 2-hour, 3-hour, 4-hour, 6-hour, 8-hour. One of the best experiences of my life was about 3 years ago when they ran a 9-hour. It went into the dark. And the same day they were running a 9-hour on the main circuit. And, I was riding the last stint at about 8:30, and I'd actually had a dark visor. I'd forgotten to put a clear visor on, and I was battling to see a bit. And when I saw the pit board and I had one more lap to go, I lifted the visor and I just rode around, and I just saw the bike circulating on the short circuit with lights on. And then on the main track, they had the 9-hour with the Genettas and main circuit cars. And I just looked and I thought, this is heaven. I'm sure heaven cannot be better. Just life does not get better than this.
Amazing.
And it's amazing that events kept going for 38 years. This year with the lockdown, there's so many international people that just were so sad, just so want to be here. If you look at the comments on Facebook, they all cannot wait to get back. Hudson Kenor, the ex-South African that rides TT, and we've got to know, well, he promotes that series hugely overseas. He's just got a series for himself over there with about 100 bikes in it doing short circuit endurance racing. So many of those teams want to come out. So I've been talking to Des and to Dave Abrams. I think there's a massive opportunity to take 40, which will be in this will be 39. So in 2022, there's an opportunity to build that into a massive event, because I'm not sure there's another event in the world that's been run 40 years unchanged format, same track. And there's so much international and all interest in it. Hopefully we can build that up and get number 40.
Absolutely. It'll be a historic event,
Yep.
I think, just quickly, John, I want to actually just add to that as well. And we were talking earlier on, now, putting things into perspective, in the old days, with the Springbok series, not only in this country, but also, of course, in New Zealand and Australia with the Tasman series, but people still, and overseas riders and drivers, still want to come to South Africa and race our circuits and race against us. That means a hell of a lot, actually, because it means what they think of us and that we are underrated talents. in my mind.
We so underrated, and we underrated in terms of what we've got here. You know, the rest of the world's become for skrik on health and safety and all that type of thing. And when they come back, Mick Grant, I mean, he's ridden TT. He's one of the. He's survived many TT events. You know, one of the top. I mean, to survive 20, 30 years at TT, that's a special person. When he comes and races here in the historic bikes, he says it's like going back 30 years overseas. There's no nonsense. There's no officialdom nonsense, no health and safety type. You just get out, you have a great time, you're in the sun, you race and you party afterwards, you know. That doesn't happen overseas. And the other thing we really do not appreciate is what we have here in Cape Town and East London. We've got Killarney and East London. Killarney is absolutely unchanged since 1960. I mean, there's very few. I know the safety aspects of Killarney are not great, and I do. When we were racing the national circuit, to be honest, I at least enjoyed driving at Killarney because it has outgrown some of the safety, but that's just part of it, you know, is what it is. But particularly East London. East London is exactly the same as they ran it in 1960 for the Grand Prix there. And when particularly the Dutch people come out and the internationals come out for the historic racing, they go to East London and they just look at it. They say, if this was anywhere else in the world, there'd be a wall around this place. It would be a heritage site. And a few years ago, the council wanted to build low-cost housing, you know, on the site of the track. East London should be just wrapped up in cotton wool because there is no other track in the world, and particularly with Potter's Pass and Rifle, the two fastest corners in the world, because anywhere else in the world, those corners would be slowed down for health and safety reasons. So when the foreigners come here and they can come and drive Killarney and they can go to East London, and East London, you've probably been there, it's got the beach right behind the track, the scenery, the social scene afterwards. It's heaven for them. Absolutely heaven. We don't appreciate what we've got.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry. And you're coming back to 1989.
Drivers.
Yeah, John, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, I can do. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So coming back, 1989, you won the Western Province Coastal Championship, am I correct? In a car, and you got your VP colors for that.
Yeah, I won the Western Province Championship and the Coastal Championship. Yeah, because in going into '84, I had to go do my 2 years national service. So I had a Works Yamaha ride in '84, which I couldn't take, so I arranged it for somebody else. And then something really. Then there was the master stroke of Dennis Jabir getting Group N going, which started in '85, the first ever 9-hour. And I actually switched a year late. The people that switched straight into Group N, Dion Jabir, Steve Wyndham, those guys, they got works drives very quickly because the manufacturers saw Group N and they all wanted to be there. I carried on with bikes in '86, and then I bought a Cadet and started Group N in '87, which was fantastic. Bought a car for 2,800 Rand, and myself and my dad traveled the whole series. We fantastic. They had the Coastal Series, so you did 3 races: Cape Town, 2 PE, 2 East London. We drove the car up and down. You raced on road tires. Absolutely, Stanek gave you actually used to come out with more money in your pocket than you left because you had traveling money and fuel from Shell. And then I raced the Cadet, and then '88 I landed a Toyota drive. I drove the 1300 Conquest for Toyota in '88. Had a very good drive. I went up to the opening of the car. Actually, another little unique record. I drove in the very last event of the day on the old long Kyalami, and I drove in the opening event of the day on the new shortened version for Toyota.
Oh, my word.
And then I think Roddy just beat me to the championship. There's an infamous story. This guy, Pro Team Racing, a guy who built this big racing team, but then there was a bit of fraud involved and things that happened. And the day, 2 days before the final round of the Coastal Series, with Roddy Turner and myself even on points. Unfortunately, the owner got put in jail and the whole team fell apart. And Opel helped Roddy with a works car, so he beat me by I think 1 or 2 points to the Coastal Championship in '88. And then in the national, I think we had a fair season. I mean, the competitor, the other Toyota drivers were Basil Mann, Leon Murray, Keith Burford. There was a strong team, but then unfortunately Toyota pulled out. The new Conquest came out, the big one. It was not competitive, so Toyota pulled out. So I was high and dry. And then we heard that Willie Hepburn had a Mazda EGI in Joburg for sale, which he'd raced. And we also heard that Mazda gave you 600 Rand a race. So I actually went and bought the car on HP I won't mention which bank, but I financed it through a bank. Used the 600 Rand a race that Mazda gave to pay it off. and got this. We went up to drove up to Joburg, got there. Well, he had already converted the car back to a road car. So we sat in. I slipped out of work for one night to go and fetch this car, and we ended up there 2-3 days waiting while he put it back into a race car. On the way down, unfortunately, my mechanics guy that helped me a lot, he fell asleep driving. He was driving my road car with all of the parts in it and wrote that off. So we were sitting, Friday of the race with a written off road car and the race car still stuck in pole. But we got it there, and I won 14 out of 14 in the Coastal Championship, every lap record on every track, and unbeaten in the Western Province Championship. So it was just the year that launched my career. And then we went to the National Championship, where I gave Ben Morgenrud a hell of a run. I finished eventually third because Neil Brink was in the factory Ford Laser. I think that is that 13-inch wheels. So it was much more competitive on some of the types, that motocross Laser. Ben, I must admit, again, toughest guy I've ever raced again. Ben would have you off, and he would come and even apologize afterwards, saying he didn't see you. But man, what a tough guy to race against. But I just couldn't afford to be as robust as Ben could, because I didn't have a spare car. No, but we finished third in the National, and then that got the attention of Grapnel Silencers. But that was a watershed year. It's just my Western Province colours, Province Championship, Coastal Championship, unbeaten as a privateer. Just myself and Johan driving the car around on Kelly tires, which wasn't even a well-known brand. We put them on the map. And then Grapnel bought me the 16-valve Opel for 1990, and that moved into the Superboss years, and it just went from there. Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier that the Superboss was in a museum somewhere in Natal.
Yeah, interestingly enough, my car's back. A guy called Oliver Broom and his brother Josh Broom. Josh races a Radical in the local championship sports cars here at Killarney. They've set up a museum in Natal, and they've gone. I raced my own Superboss in 91, 92. Grapnel sold us the car. And then in 93, when Opel, Delta Motorsport, went into touring cars, they gave the 5 Superbosses out to 5 drivers. The deal was whoever won the Superboss Championship would get the touring car drive. I won it, but I didn't get the drive. Grant McCleary got the drive, just obviously had some more clout in certain areas. But they gave cars to Sean Watson-Smith, myself, Kurt Elchin, Leon Marais, and Grant McCleary. And those cars then, at the end of the year, all went to Zimbabwe. Racing was still strong in Zimbabwe then. And Oliver Broom went up there, and he's got the car. Mine, I think, was the ex-Mike Briggs car. And he's got 2 of them. He's got the ex-Watson-Smith car in a museum. And, I might get a chance to drive it again sometime.
You never know.
And then in the last few days, he's bought the 2 Sentra touring cars as well.
Amazing. It's interesting, the Radical, I'm not sure if the same Radical we're talking about, but I believe those Radicals, the one I saw on Saturday, has 2 Hayabusa motors that makes one V8.
Correct. That's the very quick one, the B26, the one that Franco Scribanti drives, not the B19, the other more modern one. It's got that it's 2 Hayabusa motors sitting on a V8 block, on a single block.
Yeah, unbelievable. And I saw this, and I actually didn't believe it until I saw it on Saturday. It was absolutely awesome. Anyhow, that's just some tidbits that I thought I'll throw in here. Okay, so then after, Bart, anything you want to add to that you can think of?
I have got a comment over here. I know we're going just slightly off the history for now, but just Doan Brink, who's a very good fan of the show here. He said, "Good evening, guys. How fast did the guys go down the back straight versus these days at Killarney?" So maybe we can put it into perspective over the years.
Sorry,
as far as
breakdown, you're talking about speed down the back straight.
Speeds in the back straight at Killarney.
Yeah. You've always got to just be careful, because the TV commentators tend to say, 230, 240 down the back straight. Just to put it in context, my Sentra at the moment on the data logging on a good lap does about 210. And that's a car that's good for about 123s at Killarney. The Superbikes definitely on data logging are doing 275. They're doing 270 at least at the end of the back straight. I've seen the data off Franco's Porsches. Those really quick cars, the real quick sports cars, are around about 250 at the end of the back straight. The touring cars were around about 220. I mean, many people thought they were faster, but the touring cars only had 200 kilowatts. They made their lap time on handling. So going back to those, if you think those cars did 19s, the old Lolas, Ferraris, they were more lightweight power but less handling. So I would imagine they were probably doing 230, 240, you know, those days with the trees right on the edge of the track. Unfortunately, it was the time when it was accepted that racing drivers died. You know, every year those guys would go to 5, 10 funerals. So yeah. So I think today the our Polar Cup cars on the data logging 207 on a really good lap, maybe 210, and I would imagine that's the same for a Class A GDI Challenge car, probably just over 200, 210. Some of the top clubman cars a lot more because there's some extremely powerful cars in clubmans now. But maybe 220. And in touring cars, because 220 touring cars, and then up to 240, 250 for the really quick sports cars, and then up to 270 for the bikes.
Whew. I hope it answered the one's question. Then 1995, you got the Nissan factory drive. Am I correct, John?
Yeah, it was, and the same chap that owned the red Opel, he bought me an Astra 200 IE. Again, myself, Lino, drove up to Kyalami. It was a Toyota economy run car. We arrived at Kyalami. It was driven up from PE. It had a roll cage, and that's all. That's standard seats, everything. Lino and myself built it in the pits at Kyalami. We didn't do it very well because it needed a bit of sorting out. But we brought it back to Cape Town, and then the first 3-4 rounds of 95, we beat the factory with it. We beat Sean Watson-Smith in the Firehawk Opel in our private car, which we were preparing ourselves. We beat him at Killarney. We beat them at Kyalami. We beat them at PE. Second PE, unfortunately, had a broken brake hose and shunted him almost all the way back to PE. And funny, Opel were very unhappy about it, and they didn't believe that the brake hose had broken. And then at the next race at Killarney, Sean had exactly the same problem. And then suddenly they said, okay, you can put braided brake hoses on. But we were very much a thorn in the side of Opel. And Nissan, we were beating the factory Nissans hands down because Devin Juby and Mark Edwards were driving them. And so I think Nissan decided they were not happy with what was happening, so they maybe killed two birds with one stone. So they arranged a test session at Swartkorps where they tested a range of drivers. Peter Lawrence, I think Claudia Putzer, Piazza Musso might have tested. There were a number of people who went up. And I was quickest in the test. So I got offered a 3-race drive in the Sabre, which was a hell of a car to drive. It was a real handful to drive. But went out. I mean, up until then, we'd always been a privateer. And, if you finished second or third and you had a good weekend, you were happy. Got to Swartkorps, got the factory drive. First race, I led for 13 laps. Lap 14, Sean Watson-Smith just got past me. And I got back to the pits. I was pretty happy, thinking it was my first ever drive. And then they looked at me and said, what happened? I'm like, no, we came second. They're like, no, but why didn't you win? And that's the day, the moment it dawns on you that driving in a factory is a different story.
Different ball game.
There is no second. You, as a privateer, you can come home and have a good party and think I finished in the factory. Second, you might as well not even have started. It's a win or nothing. But we went on. We just lost the championship. I've lost so many championships in the last race of the year. We lost the last one that year to Sean Watson-Smith at Kyalami in the Opel, in the Astra. But by then I'd convinced them to get it because I was still on almost a race-by-race drive. But then they signed me on a contract for 96, paid me quite nicely. I mean, I would have driven for nothing, but got paid quite nicely in 96. I convinced them to drop the Sabre and to go to the Sentra because they liked the Sabre from a marketing point of view, but it wasn't the right configuration with the weight high up at the back. So I convinced them to go to the Sentra, went up to Kyalami, tested it, and I just said to them, guys, we've got a winner here. This car's going to win. 96, I was the team leader, and with Devin Juby. And the first race of the year, I got a stone through the radiator, overheated. Second race of the year, one of the Class A cars, I think Luftu Plessis took me off at PE, and it got to the third race. I said, sorry, we swapped over. Devin's going to lead. You must now concede to him. It gave away a lot of wins those years, but we did dominate. We won everything. First, second in this championship, production car champion. That's the Sentra I still own today, the one. It's the gospel race.
Yes.
And then So that really put me on the map. And then, we towards the end of '96, we started hearing these stories that some of the marketing guys had this crazy idea to run this massive, big tank, this 3-liter Maxima.
Maxima,
to try and take on the 3 to 8 BMWs. And initially we thought they were crazy. And then we did a bit of testing and suddenly went, yeah, I think we can do this. And then 97, 98, 97, we just blew the BMs away with the Maxima. They came back very hard in 98, and I actually won the race in the very, very last event of the year, and only because it rained. If it had been dry, we would have lost, but the front-wheel drive car in the rain was brilliant. Managed to beat Anthony Taylor by a point or two at Kyalami and wrap that up. Yeah.
That was the year, 97, 98, that's when you won the Class A Group N championship in the Maxima, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
97, I think, we caught them napping. Robbie Smith, who's a great friend of mine, and with a BMW at the first race in Cape Town, he came to us and he said, but what's wrong with the cars? We said, no, there's nothing wrong. He said, but the car's sideways everywhere. What's wrong with it? I said, no, but that's a front-wheel drive car has to be sideways. A front-wheel drive car, if it's not oversteering, then it's understeering, and then you're going nowhere. A front-wheel drive car has got to be, the front's got to be pulling, and the back must just do its own thing. Opposite way around with the rear drive car. And Robbie's eyes, he said he could not believe his eyes. These things were sideways everywhere. But they made brute horsepower, and we just smoked them. And we caught them. I think I won the championship in the second last round. They came back very hard for 98, and it was a massive fight.
What engines those Maximas run?
The 3-liter V6, basically the same one that today goes into the 350Z. They expanded it from a 3-liter to a 3.5, but it's they call it the DGE engine on it. It's basically a 3-liter. I think it's originally based on a Renault motor, but it's the 3-liter V6, same as went into the hard body buckies and things.
Yeah, very powerful motor, lots of torque.
Typical Japanese, it's a very powerful motor, but they restrict it with the exhaust. So whereas you take a German car like a 3 to 8 BMW, you put a big exhaust on it, just group in the exhaust for free. The power doesn't go up much. The BM and the Nissan were both rated at about 145 kilowatts. The first Nissan we took to Kyalami, put a big exhaust on it, just jumped straight to 165 kilowatts because the Japs had restricted it with the exhaust.
Yeah.
And then, we eventually, with a bit of work on the grouping, you were allowed to just fiddle the valve seats, and everything had to be within 2%. You could a bit of compression and engine mapping. I think they got the Maximas up to about 190 kilowatts.
Oh, that's a lot of power. What tire pressures would you guys run in those cars? In those days, that's a big car.
You ran extremely. The Maximas, you ran 6 degrees of camber on the front. People used to look at them and think the front suspension had broken. Used to run 6 degrees of caster, 6 degrees of camber. But the Group N story, the rules were you had to run on standard road tires, but they were anything but standard. There was a tire war going on between Goodyear, Continental, and Firestone, so they would actually make pretty special tires just to keep it all legal. They'd drop a few into the marketplace, and you'd have somebody with a tire dealer who'd come in and he would complain he put a new Firehawk on. It only lasted 2,000 kilometers. And then they knew exactly what tire that was. They said, no, sorry, we'll give you a new one. And so that's one of the racing tires that got into the market.
The softer compounds.
Yeah, they had to, just to keep it legal, they distributed a few into the marketplace. But essentially, they were still a road structure, a road construction. So you ran them hot about 3.2 bar. So they ran incredible temperatures. The Maxima being front-wheel drive with braking, steering, and powering. The front tires would get up to 90 degrees. So you probably started them at about 2.5, and they would go to about 3.2 hot.
Oh, to make the rear
2.5 cold. And then, once they went over about 3.2, they just went too hard.
Sure.
But like any front-wheel drive car, you want the back to oversteer. So you would just carry on pumping the back tires until they let go. So you'd go up to maybe 3.5 bar in the back. Like we did when my son raced the Polo Cup car, you would sometimes just go right up. You just keep pumping the back until it breaks.
Amazing. That's something. That's something good to know for the guys that are racing. That maybe new racers. That's something interesting to think about. You pump it, and the Polo Cup drives on semis. Am I correct? Semi slicks.
When we were doing it, they were on Conti slicks, but then they went to the Dunlop semis. Yeah.
Dunlop, so they're kind of road tires, if you think about it, or.
Oh, that's for the guys racing, that's the quickest way. While you're setting the car up, you just keep on pumping the back tires up and up and up until the car oversteers. It's saying that if a front wheel drive car feels safe, it's slow. A front-wheel drive car that's quick must feel scary. It's got to be hanging out all over the place.
Yeah.
And then once you've got the right setup, then you can actually then go and take some camber off the back and then drop the tire pressure. But that's a very quick fix at the track. Just keep on pushing the rear pressures up until they slide.
Very interesting. Pardon? Any comments there?
Just going back to those days, John, 97, 98, the way Group N was going, what were the thoughts at that time? Because, of course, within a number of years, probably less than a decade, Group N would become production cars, which weren't really, well, was called production cars, wasn't the old Group N format, and then, of course, would eventually fizzle out. And now we speak today about trying to get a Group N series back. What was the feeling those days? Was there a feeling that the writing was on the wall?
Not really, because it was so big. I mean, there was a Class E class just for 30 Opel Cubs and Toyota Conquest, because they were cheap. People drove them to the track, and they did it very well. They made Class D, which was E was 1300, D 1600, and then C were 2 liter or 1600 multi-valve. They kept those still Group N, so you had to use standard springs. You could modify the shocks. They kept them really in the Group N spec. But then they let Class A and B, where the factories wanted to play. Slowly, the rot started there. They started to let them fit an LS diff. That started. Firstly, the Class A cars, you see, BM came out with a standard LS. So, and I think the maximum will be fitted in LS. So then you had to fit an LS diff. Then the Class B guys said, no, we want LS diffs. Then they let LS diffs into Class B. Then they said, no, the cars do. And then they let them go to coilovers. And it just slowly crept its way through. And once that started to happen, you see, in 98, it was so big. We had Class A and B, where there was the factories. Like I said, if you look at NASCAR and you're sponsored by Caterpillar Tractor and you come 10th, but you've had a good race, Caterpillar's got their coverage. If Nissan doesn't win, they come second to Opel, they might as well have taken that money and donated it to charity. A factory can only win. So a factory wins at all costs. I mean, so you had the A and B, where there's and then it started getting to C, where Honda came in with the Hondas. So C, you had Opel fighting Honda, fighting
the Toyota twin.
Toyota. Yeah. And slowly the factories got involved. And then Class D, the Hondas came against Opels, factory cars. And slowly, when the factories arrived, I don't want to call it the rot. It was great, but at that stage we never saw it, because you had the factories fighting at the front, you had all the privateers having a great time at the back. And unfortunately, we won 98, and Nissan. I already had a drive for 99 when Nissan pulled out through some contractual issues. So I was left high and dry, and we pulled out. But so in around about 2000, it started, and Nissan pulling out, and then Honda pulled out, and then it went down quickly. But when we were there, it was just awesome. You had the front of the field fighting with every bit of money. There was budget was not an issue. You just had to win, and then you had Class C, D, and E, and in fact they had F as well, where you had privateers running cars straight off the showroom. So it was a fantastic combination. But from about 2000 onwards, it fell apart quickly.
And I remember those years, especially with, I think it was Class E and F, you had the Rookie of the Year initiative as well. I think those years you could win about 2,000 or 2,500 Rand, towards your racing career. So that was also an initiative that actually faded out.
Absolutely. And then even in the mid 90s, the Rookie of the Year went to the Jim Russell Racing School in the UK. My teammate Devon Juby went over to the UK, and suddenly you're exposed to some international stuff. So it was huge. And so unfortunately, with that died somewhere in the early 2000s. What happened actually? What we were starting to see then were road cars becoming bigger and safer. So it's a terrible embarrassment to a manufacturer when the new model's slower than the old one. But that started to happen. It happened to Toyota in 88 when the Fat Conquest came out, and it was slower than the first Conquest. And the moment that happens, then the manufacturers want to start cheating the car, and then it starts. So by 2000, cars were getting more safety conscious, bigger, and it started to unravel. Yeah.
So there was after 98, I think I remember 01 and 02, you were the Clubman's champion. Am I correct? Was it in the same
Yes. In the 99, I really was left high and dry. I had the opportunity of driving for BMW, which I turned down because I was going to drive for Nissan in 99. And then in January, there was a MTN, the main sponsor, pulled out, and that allowed them to pull out. So it was a very unexpected blow. So 99, we were just high. And actually, right at the end of 99, I drove 2 races for Toyota. Hilton Cowie got banned and I took his place with Charles Wilkin.
Yeah.
But there were two great races, but Charles being very entrenched in the team, I mean, he was super quick, and we had two drivers, but I mean, there's no ways you could get close to him. And then by 2000, I kind of caught my breath again and wanted to race, and then we saw the Centras advertised, because then Centras, the cars were driven by Ville Lombard and Steve Corner.
Yeah.
I think he moved to Australia. We saw the cars, and I think they advertised them for 120,000 for the two cars. And by then, my son was starting to get keen on karting, so we went down to a karting event, and we saw Peter Corner there. And after a few beers, he said to us, "Just come fetch the cars before I do something silly, like race them again, and we'll sort out a price." So Dave Beecroft and myself bought the two Centras. I've still got mine. Dave recently sold these to Anton Jacobs, who's still running it in Clubman's, and I think he's still got the power windows and the radio and the aircon in it.
Yeah, I know Anton. We had great dices. Anton with his Fords.
Yeah. So 2000, I brought it to Clubman's. What we actually did was everybody knew that at the end of 2000, touring cars was going to come to an end, but they were going to replace it with Pro Car. So we prepared it for Pro Car, but in 2001, that never got off the ground. But I've got a lovely memory that in 2000, we came third in the final ever Pro Car race at Killarney. But so then 2001 and 2, we raced it in Clubman's, where I had phenomenal battles with Dani van Niekerk in his BM. I mean, it was phenomenal racing, because, I did a 22-1 in the car, and I mean, he was doing high 22s. And those were cars that were being absolutely driven on the limit. I mean, the Centra's got 150 kilowatts, standard group end suspension. All it did is have an LS diff, standard gearbox, and as did Dani. So we drove those cars, but we managed to win, I think, 2001 too. And then by that stage, my son was starting to get keen on karting. So then we, after that, then Kobus Klaas and Bell Motors bought the touring car Centra. So then Kobus drove my Centra, and I had a season in the ex-touring car, the ex-Janelle de Villiers, Nick de Waal Centra. But then we did a 19 dead in that and got banned by Clubman's, because they'd already then brought in this cutoff at 21.9 or 21.5. So we were banned, and, I mean, one thing you don't do in racing is ban somebody when a sponsor's put a lot of money in. There must be a better way, but the sponsor just decided, no. He packed up and said, "I'm out of here," So the car was sold to Kobus Klaasen, and then recently, last week, it was bought from Namibia back, and Josh Broom's busy restoring that same car. And then after that, I've always continued to race the Centra, and in fact, it's ready to race. I'm going to race it again as soon as we can get some crowds back. And I like the atmosphere with all the crowd there. But by then, my children were getting involved in karting, so I focused on that.
Okay, so I know your son John Craig Jr. as well. There was a time we were talking about earlier on when you guys drove the same car. Was it Enduro or something? A 3-hour.
Yeah. Picture on the wall there.
Okay, so maybe we should get the other driver in as well, and you guys can talk as a father and son team.
Yeah.
What do you say, Byron?
Hang on for 1 second. I'll do it.
No, I agree 100%. Just chatting.
What time to come in?
I commentated a number of years ago when John was in Clubman's karting. I remember commentating. He still won the championship in his first year doing the Clubman's karting.
This is John Jr. talking about, eh?
John, yes.
Okay,
there we go.
How's it going, guys?
Good man. Hey, how's it there, John?
Well, John Jr.
Long time no see, eh?
Yeah. Well, good evening. Welcome to the show. It was just like a last minute thing. I mean, your dad told us about this 3-hour Enduro that you guys drove together and you won. And I said, no, it's a perfect opportunity to get both of you. I'll get your son and chat about it. Chat about what happened, how you guys prepared the car, the race. Talk about some stories around that.
Yeah, it was back in 2014. I just did my first season of Polo Cup. It was around about the time that the South African Endurance Series was starting to get going. I think Roger Pierce had come up with the idea, and they might have had 1 or 2 endurances that year. And then I think it was December time, they decided to have a 3-hour, which we thought, why not? Let's have a go at it. And My current national polo time, I think, was in the panel shop in the final Cape Town round. I got taken out and rolled by Daniel Rowe, and we were looking at getting a spare car. And Jeffrey Kruger, a good friend of mine, I think he just started competing in the polo series in Europe, in the VW series, and we bought his car as a spare car. Bought it as a rolling chassis without a motor, and we still had an old 20 valve motor. We kept aside from my previous car at the time. And I spent a week building it up, fitted the motor, tested it, got it running, tested it a week in advance. But that week building up to the race was really stressful because we didn't have a lot of equipment in terms of refueling jug and trying to source people or get mates involved, to help with the stops, because we had to do a stop halfway through the race.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it was, as anything in motorsport building up to, we never stopped working until the race began. And it was a really great race. I think my dad started the race. There were 2 or 3 cars in our class at the time. And I took over at the halfway mark, and we just got it all the way home. Had 1 or 2 moments in the race where we had an oil pressure issue. Made it home in one piece, and it was quite a great memory, for a race.
Yeah, it was amazing.
And
the race started, I think, at 2:00.
Yeah,
2 hours 2. At 1:00, we were still building the car in the pits. I mean, we were still arranging. I mean, we didn't have a pit crew, and we had a Zimbabwean chap that helped us at home in the garden. We were busy training him how to change brake pads on the one side. My wife was the team manager. And we had another guy who worked for me, driver from work. We were teaching him how to change the pads on the other side.
Yeah.
And luckily, at the actual pit stop itself, Johanna van der Hesthuizen and his dad were hanging around there, so they jumped in and also helped.
Wow. Hey.
But fantastic. The car ran like clockwork. John, it was amazing. We were actually, about an hour to go, we were stroking home. We didn't have a radio then.
We actually did. We had one made out of a cell phone stuck on the steering wheel. It was actually quite funny. There were times in the race my dad would actually call in, and I would try and on my iPhone try and swipe or answer the phone. And we couldn't let the phone obviously run for the whole 3 hours, otherwise it would have been a huge phone bill. But
he used to phone in, and then we were just stroking home, and he, by an absolute miracle, he came out of turn 4 and he saw the oil gauge, the pressure gauge flick. And he came in and said he's seen it flick. We had a lap or 2 in hand, and we pulled the dipstick out, and there was nothing. It was absolute. If we hadn't seen that, I don't know how we would have never finished. And obviously, what happened, we discovered later we never run the motor in properly, so it used oil. Yeah. And we ran around. We grabbed a tin that had I don't even know what was in it. We just dumped it in to get the car to the finish, and fantastic.
It could have been something like whiskey or rum or something. Who knows?
Could have been anything. As long as we sent him straight back out again. And we'd love to continue in the endurance series, but like a lot of other things, it's become extremely costly. I mean, now I think that just the entry fee, you're looking at 10 to 15 grand or whatever, to enter the endurance. We'd love to do another one, but what we want to do is we've still got the car. The car's in the garage, same engine. Neander Toys recently just changed the bearings in the bottom end for us, and we want to try and take it to the PE 3 hour this year. That's a great event.
I drove in, we drove in, myself and 2 of my buddies, one passed on now, years ago with the 3 hour enduro in PE. It's also, we drove a Toyota Corolla, the rear wheel drive still. It was years ago. I think that we drove it in Class D. We actually ran our class set here, but it was Scribanti is an awesome track. Scribanti is an absolutely awesome track. Tight, very technical, but it was a beautiful track. So this is quite interesting. So John Jr., you drove Polo Cup, right? And you consequently don't drive Polo Cup anymore.
Yeah, I drove from 2014 to 2016. 2014 and 2015, we ran the Vivo shape. And then towards the end of 2015, Volkswagen Motorsport, from a marketing point of view, decided to go with the 6R shape, which was the 6R was an awesome car compared to the Vivo. The Vivo was a really terribly handling car, but it taught you how to drive. Polo Cup had always been an ambition of mine. My main circuit career started I think it was June 2011. My first race was in absolutely pouring rain in the Golf Mark II. and I drove that in 2012 and 2013. But the goal was always to do Polo Cup. And then, matriculated into 2013, so school was out of the way. And when the opportunity came, I took it with two hands. And we drove. We started in 2014. We did it, as privateers the whole way. I think in 2016, I was the only driver on the grid that actually built my own car. The rest were all driving for teams, like the Ferrari team that was run by Van der Linde. And then obviously Pepper had their team, so the majority of the drivers, actually never really touched their car. As I said, in 2016, I was the only guy that was preparing my own car and still driving as well. Unfortunately, at the end of 2016, it came to an end, I think, just due to finances. They kept the 6R for another year or two, and then they went to the current shapes. But like everything else in motorsport, unfortunately, the costs and that just sort of got out of hand. Also, then by 2019, also started, working for actually in the off-road world, for KTM Cape Town. That's my current job. Work unfortunately is just taken over like everything else in life, and so I haven't really had time to drive. But 2014, 2016, running nationals for 3 years was really memorable.
Yeah, we had a great time. I mean, I used to drop John at the airport 6 o'clock on a Thursday morning with a toolbox. We had to wrap the toolbox in plastic and take it through oversize. Then he would fly up, then I'd fly up Thursday night, get a friend to pick him up, drop him at the track, race. Then put the car on a transporter. They always somehow managed to damage the car. The transporters are used to not moving race cars. So you arrive at the track, they've damaged something or they've stolen the fuel out of the car, and then you sort that out. Race, and then put it back on the transporter, fly back on Saturday night to Sunday morning. So it was fantastic. We got so close to breaking through. I mean, one Cape Town race, you might remember Polo Cup, the top, they used to reverse the grid, and John got a 7th, and a 6th would have been pole for the second heat. And I think we were so quick that weekend he might have been able to up and duck, but I think that race 7th, the clutch failed. So it got quite close. But like I said to you earlier, the first Polo Cup, the Vivo, we paid 80,000 Rand for. Yeah. Then when they went up to the 6R, they charged us basically 40,000 for the kit. So you built the R using the parts from the Vivo, and then you could sell the rest. And then when they came out with the current one, it jumped to 350,000. So 80, you can make a plan. 120, you can make a plan. 350, and the current one now, I mean, the turbo one is probably 500 now. So
crazy.
So
only people with lots of money can afford to race those cars nowadays.
Yeah, it's supposed to be an entry formula, but unfortunately, it's only an entry formula for somebody that's got a big budget now.
Yeah. John, you were saying?
It's just like the most favorite or interesting piece of racing I've ever done was in 2018. I was in the United Kingdom, and I did something called the Citroen C1 Cup 24-hour. In the UK, they've got a series full of Citroen C1s. They're not a popular car in South Africa, but in the UK they are. And basically, I don't know what was in rands, but you could pick up a car there for £4,000. And they were actually, they're only 3 cylinders, but it's like the new age Group N. They got bolting cages, they ran on skimmed 14-inch Nankang tires, and even the radios and the dash were working, and they're road registered. And I picked up a drive in the 24-hour, and there were 36 cars in the grid and 36 cars finished. And it was something amazing to do a night stint where I did the graveyard shift, from 4 o'clock into the sunrise. And I also, on the previous day, or on the start, did the night shift where it went from day into night. But it was a perfect example, in the UK that it is something to get a series like that going again, particularly here, whether you use a VW up. But, because it's endurance racing, it was in cheap endurance racing, so you could get other people involved. I think we had a total of 4 or 5 drivers, including myself. And
what it cost, £500?
It cost £500. I think I got a bit lucky. I picked up the drive online, so on Race Cars Direct. Somebody was advertising the drive. Phoned the guy. He was 2 hours away from where I was staying. Took a drive up and went into this industrial area and saw the car. Sat in the car, drove it up and down the road, and they said, okay, we'll see you at the track. We drove at Rockingham, which is a British track, which is actually an oval, sort of like a NASCAR oval, and it's got an infield. Used it as a bank, and then went on to the infield. That was probably the most interesting piece of racing I've ever done. But it was just an example that, if one ever has, the idea or the drive to get a cheap racing formula going again, that's an idea you can use. You know,
I mean, pay equivalent of 10,000 rand for a drive in a 24-hour. I mean, if we could buy a drive in a 24-hour for 10 grand, I mean, we'd both be there.
Exactly. Yeah, it's actually, like I said earlier, and it's quite sad. I mean, to see the state of motorsport in the 60s before I was born, before Biden and John Jr. was born, to the 2020s, 21, where, it's the state of motorsport is not in a good state. But you know what? It can be changed if the mindset changes, I would assume. Biden?
No, I agree with that, Abdul. Just one thing, I just want to say good evening to Etienne Dutoy, enjoying the show. Of course, he was on the show with us not too long ago, and also a Group N challenger at one stage in the Conquest, and of course went to the Ford Fiestas as well. But going back here, the thing is, I know they promoted the other day about the new GTC season coming up, and that it's promised now to be great, and it's promised to be this. But I don't know if we can we take that seriously, you think, John Senior and Junior, with GTC, whether it's going to be good?
Make no mistake, they're beautiful cars. The problem is they're so expensive because so much of the hardware is imported. I mean, the transaxles and things. So that's the problem. Figures get inflated, but you are literally looking at, I think, 3 million, between 2 and 3 million for a car. Running them is expensive. Why? Around about the time they went GDC, they could have gone TCR. You can buy TCR cars overseas for, I don't know, 50,000 euro.
Yeah, according to rands, I think at the time they were about 900,000 rand, which is still a lot of money, but they were cheaper than the GDCs.
So for R1 million, you can get a car which is not as high spec. The GDC cars have got slowly quicker. I think they're down to about 15s at Killarney now, which is as quick as the Super Tourers went, in 1994. So make no mistake, they are quick race cars, and I know they take a huge amount of flack on social media and whatever. And I suppose they do deserve them, because you'd have 8 on the grid and 2 finishes, or 3 finishes, or 8 enter, 6 start and 4 finish. Although I must say, a couple of times they were in Cape Town last year or 2 years ago, there's reverse grid races, tremendous racing. So, but I just think the bottom line is they're just too expensive. They're just too expensive, too complex. They should have pulled the plug on it ages ago and just said, okay, let's go back and look for TCR or do something. So as a pure racer, they're beautiful cars. I'd give anything to drive one. One appreciates them, but I think they're just not appropriate for us, for South Africa.
Yeah, I think the other thing with TCR as well, you could sort of, if you had TCR cars in the country, you could almost sort of do something similar like they did back in the 90s, like the Rainbow Cup. There's international drivers racing, TCR cars in Europe and Asia, and I think the UK now, we're trying to get a TCR championship. You could try and get a couple of those drivers out here if you had a South African TCR championship. So you could have local and international drivers, but you would also be getting cars that have already been tested and set up. And you would have also international backing as well, if you had any technical issues with the car. I think with TCR, they sort of try to copy the Australian touring cars, and then instead of using V8s, going with turbo motors. But yeah, as I said, I'm like, somebody put money in there, somebody tried to get it off the ground, and I commend them on that. But unfortunately, I just think for the South African economy, they're just too expensive.
Yeah, you can look in history. The few times racing has gone crazy. Superbikes in the early 80s, you could go onto the bike dealer, buy a superbike, put tape on the headlights, and you went and raced them. You used to have to qualify at Kyalami. They only allowed 60 bikes in each class, and there were too many. Group N, at one stage, you had to qualify, because you could go into the showroom and buy a car. You cannot buy a GDC car. I think when you talk about money, there's money around. If you look what's going on in the sports car series, I saw a video recently, Silvio Scribanti in Port Elizabeth has just imported 2 GD3 Lamborghinis. They were testing them at Scribanti the other day. I mean, if you look what Franco's got, and Marcel Angel with his 2 cars. So the money's there, but the key is they can bring a GD3 car into the country, keep the international support. When there's a problem, you just plug it into the internet and they can set it up from overseas. We've gone and created these beautiful GDC cars here, but they don't link to anything. I think that's the big problem. So it's not so much money. There's money around. The privateers will spend it, but you need something. And then at the end of the year, when you finish with your GD3 Lamborghini, you sell it back to Dubai or out east, and you get some of your money back. Our GDC cars are so unique that it's not a market. I think that's the problem.
Yeah, but I mean, also if you think about that type of racing, I mean, it's basically the people with the money will be able to afford to do that type of racing. If you want to get racing to keep growing in South Africa, you got to have a grassroots entry level motorsport formula that is going to sort of enhance the talent that we have locally and in South Africa.
Absolutely, and that's where John was saying. I mean, there's huge debates going on Facebook about Group N starting again. It's not possible. It is possible. The bottom line is that it's being done. That class he drove in the UK with a Citroen, there were 36 cars in his race, but there was another 36 earlier in the day. And earlier that year, they had a 24-hour service and they had 100 cars on the grid.
Ooh.
So if a first world country like the UK can race C1 Citroens on standard springs, standard 14-inch Nankang tires, basically standard brakes, still the radios working they even had silencers on them because it was a 24-hour and they didn't want to wake up the locals at night. And I tell you, on the Rockingham Oval, a train of 20 of those cars running nose to tail did not look slow. They're little 60, 70 kilo cars, but they did not look slow. But somebody needs to put their pride in their pocket and just say, I mean, some of the best racing was the days of the Group N Class E cars. They were doing 42s at Killarney. But it was fit. So if only somebody could just say, we're going to do this, we're going to bring them, and we're going to make a plan. But, it's just not happening.
You know what's actually quite interesting? As a spectator, I mean, we've all been spectators once in our lives. And it's not how fast the cars are going because we don't know how fast the cars are going as a spectator anyway. It's how close the racing is. And that was with the Group N, the Class E's. They were going 1 minute 42s. That's slower than the Class D-E Clubman's car, but it was so close. The racing was so tight, so close, so exciting. I remember those days. I mean, anyhow.
Fantastic. I mean, Class A, the Superbus, not just the Superbus, the 16-valve Opels, and the first 3 to 5 BMs, they were only doing 30s, which is slower than a Class C GTI Challenge car today. Exactly. But when the racing was legendary, so it's not about speed.
Absolutely. Anyhow, so just we've run out of time now. Is there anything else that John Jr. and John Senior wants to just maybe share with us? In the last minute or so, how you guys, what's the future plans for you guys? Anything that's out there. What are you guys going to do? You guys going to race again? Father and son team. Who knows? What are the future plans? What is expected from you guys in the next couple of years, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. That win we had in 2014 was one of the best ever days of events of my life. So we would like to do that again. Unfortunately, the endurance series has got a little bit out of hand now. To run a 9-hour at Killarney, I mean, by the time you've paid the entry, paid the fuel, and what many people forget in endurance racing, you must cost at the end of the 9 hour the car's trashed, so you must cost a complete rebuild into it. But maybe we can go and do the PE race, the 3 hour. And maybe even try and buy a drive in one of the longer races. Certainly myself, the centre is ready to go. Picture you've got with it blowing up there, we've sorted that out. So I just I can't wait for spectators to be back. There's a lovely bird called Gees, and to actually go race at Killarney with no spectators and no Gees, it's just not worth the effort and time. I just want to wait until we go back and you race and you meet everybody. That's all part of it, and hopefully that comes back. The Polo's in the garage, and so hopefully we can share that somewhere. And who knows? There's somewhere along the line. I mean, when I got my factory drive, I was 34, 33. So if a nice class came back, like a kind of a Group N, that we could get back in, it had some publicity, maybe pick up a few sponsors, get back involved with John again, and see what we can do.
It'll be good, absolutely. I mean, in the meantime, if you guys want the Gees back of racing, come and join Gymkhana. There's Gees, trust me. With or without spectators, there's Gees. Just ask Leon the toy. He drove on Saturday and he had an awesome time. I mean, awesome time.
Yeah.
So
We've had a lot of. In fact, we had 2 cars. We've still got John's Golf, and we were planning to do the Outta rally the last few years, and it's still on the. I was lucky enough in 88 and 89 they ran Group N rallies. We actually rallied the race cars. We rallied the Group N race cars, and that lit my desire for rallying. And we're definitely going to do something like either a Gymkhana or we'll take the cars and do the All-Star Rally.
Yeah, the Gymkhana is perfect because you guys can, both of you can drive and both of you can be navigators with the same car. So yeah, so you must just let me know because we kind of organize the Gymkhanas at Killarney and the next event's on the 13th of March. And hopefully a couple after that for the rest of the year as well. Byron, in closing, anything you want to share with us quickly?
I just see Martin Richards, Miss Good Datsun man over there saying, hi, John, great show tonight, of course, as well, from all of us. So, it's been, there's a lot of great talent, I think, here in Cape Town as well, over the years and everything as well. We are underrated, I think, like we were speaking about earlier on, that what happens is the rest of the world want to race against South Africans. The rest of the world want to see what South Africans do. Yeah, I know it's not always possible for us to go over there and spend great amounts of money. I know the Van der Lindes have been up there. Jonathan Aberdeen has been doing a great job and everything like that. But at the end of the day, I feel the talent is here. We need to get our motorsport back up and running great again. The crowds need to come back. So there's a lot to think of. That's just my thought for the evening over there. And John Senior and Junior, John, it's been great having you guys. Hey, it's just to talk good old motorsports. That's what it's all about.
Yeah,
just the last question. Who was quicker in that 3 hour, Senior or Junior?
It was very little in it. There was in qualifying you pushed a bit, and endurance racing you obviously always lap a little bit off. So there was nothing in it.
I think we wanted to make it home in one piece, and endurance racing.
That's always important.
Every lap at 11 tenths, you're going to make a mistake. So we just once you get into a good position, you just try and stroke it home. So
absolutely,
that was the main thing.
I'm glad. You know what? It's so nice to see a father and a son team that's so talented. Still at your age, John, and at your young age, other John, beautiful. And I just want to thank you guys for giving up your time tonight. I know John Jr. wasn't even scheduled to be on tonight, but he took his time out to come and say hi, which I think was a brilliant idea because youngsters out there can see that it can work with your father. I mean, you guys can drive together, you can build a car together, and it's good. And then have your mom as the team manager. What more do you want? I mean, come on, like really. Absolutely brilliant. And I just take my hat off to the Craig family for all the things that have done for motorsport over the years, and continue doing it for the rest of the motorsport years you have left in you. And thanks to the viewers for tuning in tonight, and all the guys on Facebook and YouTube and wherever else out there, the viewers, the normal, the viewers that every Wednesday 8 o'clock they log into Straight Cape Town. Thank you very much for those guys as well. And just remember, the 13th of March we have next Gymkhana at Killarney from 2 till 7. And next weekend, Wednesday, the next show is Straight Cape Town at 8 o'clock as well. Not too sure who's on. If I'm not mistaken, I think it might be Ines Marutka from ex-Western Province Rally Champion. It'll be interesting story as well. There's a lot of stories to tell. Also, privateer that went up against the factory Toyota teams and beat them. So kind of similar story to you guys. Anyhow,
I think he drove in his Group N rallies we drove in. I think Ines drove in one of those. So it goes back to those days. And in terms of keeping going, we've only got to look at two icons like Sarel and Wooly that are a good few years older than us, and they're going strong. So there's no reason why we're
Absolutely. So guys, once again, thank you so much for being on the show tonight, and thanks for all the information, all the value-added information you guys have shared with the viewers tonight. I wish you guys well on your motorsport journey, and see you guys soon. Thank you, Byron. We'll chat and catch up soon.
Thank you, Abdul. Thank you, John.
Have a wonderful evening.
Okay, bye.
Cheers, guys.
Yeah, cheers.
Bye.
Bye.